Hi, this is Brooks, and welcome back to Breakthru Chinese. Today's program is the second in a series where we discuss key concepts that have shaped our approach to teaching Chinese. In the 10 years that we've been working on this project, we've observed that Chinese has several unique characteristics that set it apart from almost every other major language. And these characteristics really do have an impact on how we approach working with our students. Just to recap, Chinese is three distinct language systems. Chinese is a visual language, and homophones are a big deal in Chinese. Today's program covers the second of these concepts, that Chinese is a visual language. Aside from the obvious visual nature of characters, we're also going to discuss the way in which we recognize character patterns. Recent studies have suggested that Chinese character pattern recognition occurs more in the visual cortex than English word recognition does. And that makes a huge difference in terms of the skills needed to learn written Chinese. The term neuroplasticity refers to the way our behavior, experiences, and training affect both the function and the structure of our brains. The idea that brain structure evolves in accordance with how we use it is no longer a novel concept, but its application in the field of character-based language acquisition is still quite new. Recent research has shown that professional violinists have a highly developed motor cortex relative to the general population. We can't say whether people who are likely to succeed at learning to play the violin naturally have a more developed motor cortex, or whether practicing vibrato, harmonics, and bowing techniques creates that development. But clearly there's a difference in brain structure between professional violinists and the rest of us. In a similar fashion, native Chinese speakers have a highly developed visual awareness and a tolerance for visual complexity. Functional MRIs of native Chinese speakers show that when using their mother tongue, they use their visual cortex to a much higher degree than Westerners. As a real-world example of this, let's take a look at one of China's most popular web portals, Sina.com. The Chinese name is Xin-Lang, Xin meaning new and Lang meaning wave, so new wave. Cool name. A typical US portal such as Yahoo might have a header menu with 5 to no more than 10 menu items, but if you look at Xin-Lang's site, there are well over 60. Below the menu header, you'll note that there are a series of blocks, each representing a separate news category. And in each block, there are 15 or more individual items, each a link to the full story. And as we scroll down, we see that there are more than 40 blocks of items in all. More than 600 items are displayed on Xin-Lang's homepage. Think about that. It takes extraordinary visual skills to be able to scan that many articles to choose the one that you're interested in. And there appears to be a strong correlation between visual pattern recognition skills and success in learning Chinese. What's been missing has been the link between this concept of neuroplasticity and the techniques used to teach the Chinese language. By studying Chinese as a network of words, characters, components, and compounds, we're literally building neural muscle and developing our visual cortex, or at least our capacity to use it. This network model is at the core of our methodology. In our experience, it's never been used as the basis for teaching Chinese. Instead, Chinese is almost always taught as if it's yet another Western language, meaning that most Chinese courses adhere to some variation of the topic-centric model that uses dialogues and articles, lists of new vocabulary, and bits of grammar. So let's explore what we mean by network models and pattern recognition. By nature, character-based languages are visually complex. There are 31 distinct strokes in simplified Chinese. Unlike English, where the names of each letter of the alphabet are not descriptive of the letter itself, each Chinese stroke has a name that uniquely describes that stroke. It's faster in Chinese, but imagine horizontal, left slanting downward, curved hook as the formal name for a stroke. Each character can have anywhere from 1 to 50 strokes, although typically characters in simplified Chinese have less than 20. And finally, there are 8,100 entries in the latest table of standard Chinese characters published by the government. So just by the numbers alone, compared to English letters and syllables, the complexity of a Chinese character is quite high. Some Western techniques have been introduced to make it easier to memorize character patterns and their meanings. Mnemonics is one technique where students associate the visual representation of a character with its meaning. But using mnemonics to learn characters and their meanings works with simple characters. It breaks down when you start dealing with complex or abstract characters. Let's take a look at some examples. The character for person, ren, certainly looks like someone walking. And the character for fire, huo, looks like a flame. The character for rain, yu, certainly suggests drops of water falling from the sky. But the character cang hardly looks like its meaning, which is to hide something. Only 5% of Chinese characters are true pictographs that look like their meaning. The other 95% consist of 5 types: compound ideographs, phonetic loan characters, phonosemantic compounds, which combine a phonetic component with a semantic component, and derivative cognates. The most important of these is the phonosemantic compound, which is the far most prevalent, and we'll discuss them in more detail in just a bit. Chinese characters are made up of 1 to 4 characters. Each character in a word is both semantically and phonetically significant. If you know the meaning of each character in a word, then you have a very good idea of the meaning of that word. Likewise, if you know the pronunciation of each character, then you know exactly how to pronounce that word. In this example, the word zhen zheng, which means genuine, is made up of 2 characters, zhen and zheng. Zhen means true, and zheng means upright or exact. So when the 2 characters are combined as a word, they mean genuine. Conversely, it's useful to look at characters from the opposite perspective. That is, in addition to learning the characters that make up a word, we can also learn all the common words that use a character. In this example, the character zhen is the first character in zhen shi, which means real, zhen kong, which means vacuum, and zhen xin, which means heartfelt. It's also the second character in ren zhen, which means conscientious, fang zhen, which means to stimulate, and chuan zhen, which means fax or fax machine. We can also see that zheng is used as the first character in several words: zheng shi, zheng cue, and zheng gui. Conversely, it's also the second character in zhi zheng, gong zheng, and gai zheng. So it's really important to learn Chinese at the character level. Only then can you begin to study vocabulary, which is just the opposite of English, where we generally study vocabulary and only consider syllables to understand roots and parts of speech. When we study vocabulary, instead of learning the meaning of each word, it's much easier to learn to recognize the meaning and pronunciation of each character in a word. And learning components and compounds serves to lock in a deeper understanding of each character, to reduce confusion over its meaning, and most important, to build out our network model of the Chinese language. Sentences consist of 1 or more words. But unlike English sentences, Chinese does not limit words with spaces. So the reader needs to be able to recognize combinations of characters that form words. This sentence means, I lived in Beijing for 8 years. 我以前住在北京住了8年。我以前住在北京住了8年。Now I'll repeat the sentence, emphasizing each word. 我以前住在北京住了8年。我以前住在北京住了8年。Characters, in turn, are made up of 1 or more components. Each component in a character can either be a simpler character or simply a stroke. And these subcomponents, in turn, can be decomposed further into yet simpler components. In effect, Chinese characters are a recursive hierarchy of components. We already know that the word Zhen, Zheng is made up of two characters, Zhen and Zheng. Let's look at Zhen. In this example, Zhen is made up of two components, each of which is a character in its own right. Shi means 10, and Zu means tool. If we wanted to, we could further decompose Zu into three components, Mu, Yi, and Ba. What's important here is developing the ability to mentally break down characters into simpler components and recognizing how those components are organized, because components are used over and over in different patterns. But just as certain characters are components of Zhen, so too is Zhen a component of other characters, which are called compounds. There are many compounds of Zhen. We've listed three here. Tian means to fill out a form, Chen means to scold someone, and Dian means a mountaintop. When we study characters, instead of assigning mnemonics or stories to characters as learning aids, it's much more effective to learn to recognize each component of a character as well as its compounds. By studying both components and compounds, we can develop a network model in our mind of the relationship of characters to each other. Note that our network model is bidirectional. For any given character, we're interested in both the components that make up that character as well as the compounds of which that character is a component. To recap, characters can be used in many words. Learning networks of words that use the same characters is much easier than learning vocabulary the traditional way. Knowing the meaning and pronunciation of each character makes it easier to know the meaning and pronunciation of each word. Characters are made up of simpler characters called components, and components can eventually be decomposed to strokes. But characters are also components of more complex characters called compounds. Recognizing the components of a character and its compounds is key to mastering Chinese and developing visual pattern recognition skills. By looking at Chinese as a network of words, characters, components, and compounds, we're literally building neural muscle by developing our visual pattern recognition skills. This network model is at the core of our methodology. Okay, that's it for today. Until next time, 再见.